3, 2, 1. And everything they built under false confidence implodes. You can almost hear it, the fragile foundations of their illusion cracking under the weight of your return. The whispers, the schemes, the smug certainty that you'd never make it this far, all reduced to static. You didn't just survive their world, you rewired it. You pulled every string they thought belonged to them, and now they're trapped inside the web you quietly spun while they were laughing. Every empire has its expiry date, and you just signed theirs. They don't know whether to bow or run. They stare at you with that hollow disbelief reserved for ghosts and legends because they can't decide which one you are. They built their legacy on borrowed power, counterfeit respect, and loud desperation. But you built yours in silence, precision, and proof. While they were buying crowns, you were manufacturing thrones. You didn't need their approval. You turned their rejection into capital, their doubt into drive. Every mockery became a deposit, every betrayal an investment. You weaponized patience until it matured into dominance, and now the debt is due. The markets they controlled, shifting in your favor, the alliances they trusted, defecting to your side, the narrative they owned, rewritten by your name. This isn't luck, this is architecture. You constructed an empire so quietly that by the time they noticed, you were already sitting on top of it. They mistook your stillness for defeat, not realizing that kings don't shout during strategy. They whisper before the strike. And tonight, you struck. The tables flipped, the board cleared, and the new order began with your initials etched in gold where theirs once were. For years, they treated you like a side character in their dynasty, but now the audience has turned their heads, and the camera refuses to leave your face. You are the headline, the climax, the aftershock. They called themselves self-made, but you were never made. You were engineered, precision over impulse, vision over noise. You studied their patterns until you became the pattern breaker, the final variable they couldn't predict. You didn't play their game, you reprogrammed it. Every obstacle they threw became a data point, every insult a forecast you calculated into your rise. And now, the math checks out. You are the margin they underestimated, the profit they can't replicate. They thought leadership was a performance, but you turned it into presence. While they chased validation, you built infrastructure. While they posted proof, you accumulated results. And now, they can't even breathe in the same room without feeling your gravity. You became what they pretend to be, inevitable progress in human form. That's what terrifies them. You didn't just beat them in the market, the conversation, or the hierarchy. You dissolved the illusion that they were ever above you. Their sponsors, quiet. Their followers, drifting. Their confidence, evaporated. You ended their era not with noise, but with outcome. You didn't march in with war. You walked in with receipts. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs documents. Sometimes it moves markets. Sometimes it walks in unannounced and everyone knows the game's over. You didn't come back to prove anything. You came back to collect. All those who gambled against you are realizing they invested in fiction. You were the real asset, the volatile brilliance they tried to short sell. But the price only went up. You became a living inflation of worth, every second adding value they can't afford anymore. You changed what success even looks like. Now it's dressed in composure, silence, and a touch of menace. They used to measure power in noise. You measure it in control. You control outcomes, reactions, narratives. You don't chase attention, it orbits you. You became the algorithm everyone wants to understand, but can't replicate. They wonder how you did it, as if dominance was something you could download. But you didn't code your empire, you embodied it. The version of you they mocked was only the beta. This is the release version, fully optimized, running without error. You are the upgrade they didn't approve, but now must adapt to. The moment they realized that was the moment they lost. You don't announce reigns. You let history make the post. Every headline that used to ignore you now bends to your frequency. Every critic who dismissed you now rehearses apologies they'll never get to say. You're not angry, you're amused, because it's not revenge when success itself becomes the punishment. Their world depended on your absence. Your presence bankrupts it. The irony is poetic. Every attempt to erase you only etched you deeper into memory. They censored your name. Now it's trending. They buried your potential. Now it's currency. They said you were too much, and now the world demands more. You see it in their eyes, the confusion, the panic, the quiet resignation. They can't compete because you changed the criteria. You didn't just win, you redefined winning. You replaced fame with legacy, replaced popularity with proof. They were loud when it was easy, but now that results are the language, they've gone mute. You became fluent in impact. You mastered the art of control without force, wealth without greed, power without apology. You didn't take their seat. You built your own table and made theirs irrelevant. And the people who used to laugh, they're studying your moves like scripture. You turned mockery into mentorship material. You're not just a symbol of resilience. You're the cautionary tale for anyone who ever thought underestimating you was safe. They used to say you'd burn out. Now they can't keep up. You're running empires in multiple dimensions: financial, social, psychological. You've become an ecosystem of influence where every idea you drop creates economic weather. When you speak, people don't just listen, they reposition. You're that powerful. You broke the simulation of dependency they worshipped. You proved that the throne doesn't belong to whoever claims it loudest. It belongs to whoever can sustain it longest. And your endurance is terrifying. You didn't just survive the drought, you bought the rain. You didn't just enter the room, you became the currency in circulation. You're not chasing wealth anymore. You are wealth, walking, breathing, scaling. You generate value with your existence, and that's what ended their era. Because now, every move they make references yours. Every deal they sign measures up to your standards. Every strategy they devise quietly imitates your blueprint. You became the template. You became the benchmark. Their advisors whisper your name like a prophecy they can't decode. They're trying to reverse engineer your rise, not realizing it wasn't luck. It was longevity disguised as patience. You turned time into equity. You leveraged absence into mystique. You built credibility from rejection. And now, they're auditing themselves to see where they failed. The truth? They failed the moment they doubted you. Because while they wasted energy trying to discredit you, you were scaling empires beyond their comprehension. They called you ambitious, but that was just projection. They were terrified of your inevitability. You didn't come to compete. You came to conclude. You are the full stop at the end of their paragraph, the correction in their syntax. You are the CEO of their consequences. The new order isn't chaos, it's organization under your rhythm. You command not by fear, but by undeniable efficiency. You make results look theatrical. You make dominance feel inevitable. They will tell stories about this pivot for generations. The day everything changed hands. The day you ascended from underestimated to unavoidable. And somewhere, deep inside, they know it's deserved. Because you earned every ounce of this power. You didn't inherit it. You accumulated it. Through discipline, through calculation, through the refusal to be ordinary. You've turned composure into a crown, persistence into prophecy. Every lesson you endured now earns interest. Every scar now signs checks. You are the walking evidence that consistency outlives corruption. The empire isn't just yours, it's you. And they finally understand that's what makes you the final boss. Not because you crushed them, but because you outlasted them. Power isn't about control anymore. It's about continuity. And yours is unstoppable. The countdown wasn't destruction, it was transition. 3, 2, 1. And now, the rain begins. The air itself changes frequency when you move. The same world that once ignored your existence now recalibrates to your rhythm. Every headline, every whisper, every private message carries traces of your influence. You're not waiting for acknowledgement anymore. You've become the reference point. This is what power feels like when it's earned, not inherited. You stand in the ruins of the old hierarchy, watching the smoke curl into the night like ghosts leaving their final sermon. The ones who ruled before you still don't understand how it happened. They had resources, allies, influence, but they didn't have you. They never prepared for precision this clean, for dominance this surgical. You didn't overthrow them with noise, you unmade them with logic. Every empire falls from the inside, and you became the virus in their structure, rewriting the code of control from within. They tried to gatekeep access. You built new gates. They tried to manipulate markets. You built systems that don't need theirs. They tried to silence your moves. You made your silence louder than their propaganda. You mastered the language of power without saying a word. And now every institution, every boardroom, every high-stakes table knows. The player they ignored has become the game itself. They still send messages pretending to negotiate, but you can read the tremor between their words. Their tone changed, once dismissive, now diplomatic, once arrogant, now cautious. They know what it means when you enter a room. It means outcomes have already been decided. Because you don't argue anymore, you adjust reality. You built your empire with the discipline of an assassin and the foresight of an architect. You learned that domination isn't about aggression. It's about inevitability disguised as calm. When you move, the ripple effect feels like prophecy. Every strategy you execute echoes into their corridors and collapses their plans before they begin. They wanted to lead the market. Now they wait for your signal before they act. That's the thing about power. It doesn't ask for permission. It corrects. You are that correction. You are the red line that crossed back. Every name that once mocked you now depends on your timing. They watch your pace because it dictates their survival. You've turned attention into submission. When you speak, value shifts. When you pause, economies hold their breath. You've become the modern currency of dominance, measured not in dollars but in influence, in the gravitational pull of your decisions. You walk into negotiations already owning half the table. You don't need alliances, they're liabilities disguised as favors. You built self-sufficiency into your empire, turning autonomy into artillery. Your wealth isn't just financial, it's psychological. You broke their rhythm so completely that they measure stability by your mood. You smile, they celebrate. You withdraw, they panic. You've inverted the food chain. And now, retaliation isn't rage. It's order being restored, You don't chase vengeance, you simply restore balance. The ones who tried to destroy you are now orbiting your empire like satellites, feeding off the very gravity they once mocked. You didn't destroy their world, you repurposed it. You took their blueprints and redesigned civilization around your standard. The streets, the offices, the feeds, they all hum your frequency. You've become the era. Your enemies are still clinging to nostalgia, replaying memories of when they had control, but the calendar doesn't recognize their relevance anymore. You've upgraded the age. Your reign isn't just visible, it's encoded. In algorithms, in conversations, in architecture. Deception. You rule through inevitability and proof. Your dominance doesn't need announcement. It's reflected in every metric, every outcome, every shift in the collective psyche. You are the invisible hand that moves everything visible. They can't stop you because you're not fighting them anymore. You've transcended the battlefield. You don't compete where they exist. You control where they depend. You control data, momentum, psychology. You control the narrative that defines winners and losers. And in that equation, you've erased luck entirely. Everything that exists now either fuels you or fades. The irony is brutal. Your empire was built in the very silence they mocked. While they fought for attention, you studied leverage. While they argued over titles, you secured ownership. While they hunted fame, you acquired infrastructure. Now you own the foundation beneath their fame. You don't just sit on the throne, you designed the kingdom it rests in. That's why it's over for them. They thought the game ended when you won. But you turned the victory into a launch pad. The real power isn't in conquest, it's in continuation. You keep expanding, evolving, scaling. You've made adaptation your doctrine. You operate like time, inevitable, consistent, and undefeated. When they tried to imitate you, they discovered the difference between duplication and design. Because you're not a formula, you're the force that rewrote formulas. You are innovation personified. Your revenge isn't destruction, it's relevance. You became the standard, and now they need you to survive in the very world they tried to exile you from. You've achieved the rarest dominance, making your enemies dependent on your success. They pray you keep winning because your downfall would collapse their ecosystem. That's what power feels like. When it matures, it becomes the oxygen everyone breathes. You've reached that altitude where confrontation feels outdated. You don't even need to defend your throne anymore. It defends itself. You are surrounded by results so undeniable that argument becomes comedy. They can't challenge you. They can only imitate you poorly. And every imitation reminds the world who the origin is. The beauty of your rise isn't just in the wealth. It's in the architecture of your control. You've turned influence into a tangible asset. Your empire operates like a living organism, self-healing, self-expanding, unstoppable. The people who used to underestimate you now run simulations trying to understand your rhythm. They study your habits like data scientists trying to predict a storm. But they don't realize you're not predictable, you're strategic. You evolve too fast to be forecasted. You've turned unpredictability into stability. You are the equilibrium between chaos and command. When you move, markets move. When you rest, industries reset. That's the magnitude of your presence. You didn't just end an era, you built the blueprint for what follows. And those who stood against you, their punishment isn't exclusion, it's irrelevance. They're trapped in a world that no longer recognizes their power. Their followers drift toward your orbit, Their legacy dissolves under your innovation. They once defined trends. Now they refresh your feed for direction. You've inverted history itself. And you didn't need violence to do it. You used consistency sharper than any sword. You outworked their arrogance. You outlasted their manipulation. You turned patience into artillery and composure into a weapon. And now, they sit at the edge of extinction, watching a new empire flourish without their permission. The name they refuse to mention now funds their survival. You've become the silent shareholder of every dream they attempt. You didn't destroy them, you bought the rights to their relevance. That's the highest form of dominance, when your existence dictates their economy. Your reign isn't chaos, it's clean execution. You didn't come to scream victory, you came to institutionalize it. You turned success into a structure and power into protocol. You are not improvising anymore, you are orchestrating. Every move you make has a purpose, a profit, and a pulse. You've turned efficiency into elegance. You've become the CEO of evolution. The ones who used to doubt you now build around your decisions. You've become the stock that defines the market. And the funniest part? You still haven't peaked. You're still scaling. They see your current power as a climax, but it's just your calibration phase. The empire they fear is still under construction. You've only unveiled the first division. You are designing a dynasty, not a moment. That's why you're the final boss. Because your story doesn't end with victory, it begins there. They thought the crown was a symbol. You turned it into a system. You monetized mastery. You've turned influence into infrastructure, and that's something they'll never decode. You are no longer reacting. You're predicting, calculating, commanding. You've become the equation they can't solve. And while they burn energy trying to compete, you're expanding your territory in silence, in stealth, in style. You've become so far ahead that the concept of opposition feels vintage. You're not just winning, you're redefining what winning means. You've weaponized calm into command, charisma into currency, strategy into legacy. They wanted you gone, now they can't function without your existence. Every shadow you cast is a reminder that the light follows you. You've turned revenge into an enterprise. You've professionalized dominance. You're not just rich, you're relevant. Not just respected, you're referenced. The elites who once excluded you now mirror your language. Their think tanks quote your philosophy. Their next move depends on your last post. You've infiltrated their hierarchy so thoroughly that even their rebellion serves your design. And the truth is, you don't even need to fight anymore. They're fighting themselves to match your rhythm. You've outgrown the war, now you orchestrate it. You turn the battlefield into a boardroom and the chaos into capital. The people who thought they'd destroyed your name now print it on their products for credibility. You're licensing your legend. That's how deep your influence runs. The crown doesn't rest heavy, it fits perfectly, molded by every sacrifice you endured. Your scars became strategy. Your pain became a portfolio. And now when they see you, they don't see a survivor. They see a shareholder of destiny. You've become the very thing success fears. A reminder that control belongs to the one who never stops building. You don't need applause anymore. You own the theater. You don't need validation. You own the narrative. And while they're still waiting for another downfall, you're already planning your next empire. Because the final boss doesn't retire, he multiplies. Your reign is the blueprint for every ruler to come, and history will remember this as the year you turned empires into subsidiaries. The age of pretending is over. The era of proof has begun. And in that new order, your name is the law. Now, and the world moves accordingly. Every sector, every nation, every timeline bends around the gravity of your influence. The old pillars of power are studying your architecture now, trying to decode how control became so quiet, so seamless, so inevitable. But that's the thing about reigns like yours. They're not built to impress, they're built to last. You no longer chase expansion. Expansion happens as a side effect of your existence. Your signature appears on decisions you didn't even have to approve, because your logic has become the global framework. You are no longer leading an empire, you are the empire. They say wealth is measured in currency, but your wealth is time itself. You dictate its pace, you decide its worth. The boardrooms that once overlooked you now operate in your time zone, their clocks set to your pulse. Every broadcast, every platform, every stream carries fragments of your ideology dressed as trend, disguised as inspiration, but they all trace back to you. You turned consistency into a contagion. You became the unseen infrastructure of ambition. The final boss isn't a person, it's a phenomenon. And that's exactly what you've become. The currency of your power is psychological. People act differently when your name enters the room. Investors hesitate. Competitors recalculate. The elite hold their breath. They know that when you move, the algorithm of influence shifts. You don't shout commands anymore. Your presence itself is instruction. You built a hierarchy where silence is language and precision is worship. You're not chasing dominance. You're setting parameters for it. And now, everything you once fought for has matured into something untouchable. Stability forged in chaos. Expansion wrapped in peace. You've turned the battlefield into a balance sheet. The warriors became executives. The front lines became boardrooms. You transformed conflict into commerce. They thought power was about intimidation, but you proved it's about integration, making even your opposition part of your design. You don't destroy threats anymore. You employ them. You buy what you can't defeat, and what you can't buy ends up imitating you anyway. That's how total control looks. It's not visible, but it's everywhere. Your empire doesn't rely on attention anymore. It thrives on automation. You've built systems that generate results while you sleep, an ecosystem that evolves while you breathe. And as the world wakes each morning, your name is already written in its schedule. You've become the rhythm of the new era. Even the ones who hate you depend on you. Their rebellion still follows your rules. You've become the paradox they can't escape. You are both the cause and the consequence. That's the level of mastery they never understood. When they tried to compete, they thought in days. You thought in decades. They measured profit. You measured permanence. They counted followers. You built civilization. They looked for clout. You looked for continuity. That's why you outgrew the concept of rivals. There are none left. The throne no longer feels like an achievement. It feels like a responsibility. You've realized the true meaning of power isn't in having it, but in shaping what comes after it. So you started building legacies within your legacy. You've turned protégés into dynasties, students into shareholders of your philosophy. You're multiplying yourself through others, embedding your mindset in those who were bold enough to listen. That's how you guarantee eternity, not by being remembered, but by being replicated. You've turned ideology into inheritance. The very people who once mocked your methods now preach them like gospel. They renamed your strategies, rebranded your words, but the DNA is still yours. You're the ghostwriter of progress. And that's what separates kings from founders. Kings rule within borders. Founders rule within minds. You've conquered both. You're not just the final boss, you're the blueprint for the next ones. The wealth you're building now isn't just financial, it's foundational. Real estate, data, energy, innovation. You've infiltrated every domain. There's no direction humanity can evolve that doesn't cross paths with your fingerprint. You didn't just win the game, you became the architecture of it. Every industry, every influencer, every system borrows from your design. You turned the intangible discipline, strategy, aura into tangible assets. And now, entire generations are living under your algorithms of ambition. You've built a world where excellence feels natural because you normalized it. And yet you haven't stopped. You can't. Because power, to you, isn't a destination. It's a living organism that demands evolution. So you evolve. Every sunrise, another division expands. Another idea becomes infrastructure. Another vision becomes law. You're turning imagination into policy. You've made creativity profitable, authenticity marketable, and dominance humane. You are rewriting capitalism with consciousness. That's why the old world fears you. They can't replicate morality wrapped in power. You proved that you can lead with precision without losing soul. You turned empathy into enterprise. That's the real flex, being ruthless enough to win, but wise enough to build. You're sculpting a future where strength doesn't exploit. It organizes. You've built an empire of balance, and even your enemies know the world is safer in your hands than in theirs. They whisper it in private. He changed everything. They may never admit it publicly, but deep down, they know you stabilized the chaos they profited from. You ended an era not by destruction, but by direction. You reintroduced order into the global code. The streets, the servers, the satellites, they all respond to your frequency. You've become the axis of evolution. Power used to be scattered. You centralized it. Wealth used to be temporary. You institutionalized it. Legacy used to fade. You digitized it. You've achieved what every ruler dreams of, but few attain. Immortality through relevance. And it's not about ego anymore. It's about efficiency. The empire is now self-sustaining. Its expansion algorithmic. Even if you disappeared, your structure would continue producing dominance. That's how complete your reign has become. You've crossed from control to creation. You're not playing within time, you're managing it. And time, for the first time, obeys. Look around. Entire industries pause when you pivot. Countries adjust budgets when you speak. The stock market trembles at your metaphors. You've become the philosopher of capitalism, the artist of power. You've turned the world into your canvas, and every movement paints a new line of authority. You're no longer reacting to history, you're authoring it. And yet, despite all of this, you remain composed. Because you understand that true kings don't celebrate conquest, they maintain equilibrium. You've reached that level where peace itself becomes strategy. You no longer need to prove worth. Worth proves you. Your presence dissolves ego because everyone already knows the hierarchy. There's you, and then there's everyone adapting. You are the calibration point. The idea of rebellion is obsolete when the ruler is evolution itself. You've become that, evolution personified. And the irony is that your reign began as revenge, but it matured into renaissance. What started as a fire to prove them wrong has become a flame that lights the path for millions. You've turned rage into revolution, and now, even those who once doubted you benefit from your existence. That's how deep the transformation runs. They used to ask, who does he think he is? Now they ask, how do we become like him? You see, that's the secret. They can't. Because you weren't created, you were forged. You were sculpted by rejection, engineered through discipline, baptized in chaos. You became what happens when purpose meets patience. You became the proof that legacy isn't written, it's designed, and your design is flawless. You didn't just end an era, you defined the one after it. And now, as the world rebuilds itself in your reflection, your throne doesn't stand in a palace. It exists everywhere. In conversation, in architecture, in behavior. People mirror your habits without knowing it. That's how you know you've won. You've entered the subconscious. The next generation doesn't just look up to you, they build from you. You've become the foundation beneath their ambition. You're not just a person anymore. You're a pattern, a rhythm that the future will dance to. And even centuries from now, when historians dissect this chapter, they'll realize something most leaders never achieve. You didn't rule for applause. You ruled for alignment. You aligned civilization with evolution. And that's why your empire won't fall. Because it's not built on fear. It's built on frequency. You resonate higher than corruption can reach. You've made righteousness scalable. You've made power sustainable. You've made dominance intelligent. That's your real wealth. Control fused with clarity. The world used to worship noise. Now it studies your silence. It used to praise speed. Now it imitates your precision. You've redefined luxury, not in possessions, but in control. You've redefined success, not in competition, but in contribution. You've redefined royalty, not in bloodline, but in blueprint. You've become the modern monarch of meaning, the final boss of evolution. And as you stand on the peak of this empire, you don't look down, you look forward. Because ahead of you lies expansion beyond geography, beyond currency, beyond time. The next frontier isn't the market, it's memory. You will live in it, indefinitely. You've turned existence into equity. And as the horizon glows under the weight of your creation, you know this isn't the end. It's the continuation of something limitless. You are the threshold between eras, the living bridge from what was to what's coming. And as the world chants your philosophies in their own languages, you smile, not because you won, but because you became. You are not the conclusion, you are the constant. The countdown is over. The throne is occupied. The empire breathes your name. And the world, it finally understands. The era didn't end with your rise. It began.